welcome to another musical adventure. And today we're going to stay right here in the music room, but I want to talk about what I've come to call a black hole in record collecting, in the sense that you just don't see a lot of these records out there. And a couple of years ago, if you follow my channel or have been following for a long time, you know that this is a group that I was showing some interest in and said I'm going to kind of proactively seek out some of these albums and find them. And I can honestly say that I was successful in really working on this collection, and as you'll see as we go through the collection here in the video, that's the case. But it's the band Thin Lizzy, the Irish rock band from the 70s, hard rock band. To me, one of the quintessential hard rock bands, vastly underrated and overlooked. They're primarily known for their biggest hit song, The Boys Are Back in Town, at least here in the United States. And there's a couple of other songs like Whiskey in the Jar that Metallica did a cover of. There is The Rocker, which is a fantastic rock and roll song. And I'm a big fan of the Cowboy song. But to kind of dive into their catalog is to really discover some really great material. Now there's been some lineup changes through the years, and so it's not been the same. The constant has been bass player frontman Phil Lynott, who was an amazing frontman and had such an interesting voice. And so if you're a hard rock fan or a fan of like just hard rock in the late 70s and early 80s, I highly recommend that you dive into Thin Lizzy. But here's a warning: those records are not easy to find. I guess most people that have Thin Lizzy records or bought Thin Lizzy records, they've held on to them. Now the good news is some of them have been reissued, and they're really good reissues. But let's just start going through the collection that I've managed to amass, and I'm still missing a couple of things. Most notably, the first self-titled album, they were on Decca. Now that album's been reissued a couple of times, and I'm probably going to have to resort to getting those reissues because they're just hard to find. But I was lucky enough to find a Decca. This is a import copy of their second album, Shades of a Blue Orphanage. And so I want to show you guys this album. I got a really nice clean copy of this album, and it is a really neat record. You know, they were still kind of finding their way as a band. They hadn't quite figured out that whole dual guitar sound that you know, they became noted for. I think one of their signatures was this you know, twin lead. It's a beautiful gatefold. The jacket's okay. Somebody stuck a sticker on the front, which, you know, I'm not crazy about. But this is a cool record, and one that I've never seen in the wild. And so it's one that's this is the only one I've ever seen in the wild, and I bought it. So really cool to have that one. I also have their third album, Vagabonds of the Western World. Now this is also a Decca release, and I'm going to take it out for you guys and show you. Probably get rid of the glare. Also an import pressing. Very cool record. Got the insert that came with it. And this record is where they really kind of start to really find the Thin Lizzy sound. The Rocker is on this, and it's a song that if you've never heard, I think it's just an absolutely kicker of a song. But yes, this is Vagabonds of the Western World on the Decca record label. As you can see, that blue label. And so they start Thin Lizzy starts to really become kind of the band that they're known for. And I think they switched labels at this point and put out Nightlife, which is the fourth album. And this is a Vertigo pressing. I'll show you guys the label for those of you that are interested. And these records are, like I said, you can find them in the wild, but they've just become increasingly difficult. And they're usually not in the best of shape. I think these were party records. I think people were really into it. Lots of ring wear. And of course there's the band on the back cover, and there is Phil Lynott, singer and front man Brian Robinson and Brian Downey were longtime members. Brian Downey is a great rock and roll drummer. And this one was just reissued, and I'm gonna pull it all out and show everything. But this was reissued. I believe Andy Pierce did these new issues. I think they're pressed in the Czech. Good, clean pressing, quiet vinyl. So if you don't want to pay big bucks for original pressings, which sometimes they can go for, these are definitely these reissues that came out I think earlier this year and late last year. This reissue campaign has. Really, they've done a good job. And from what I understand, these new issues are the 2014, sort of just new issues of the 2014 reissues. I don't know. I can't confirm that. But if you do know, there's probably bigger Thin Lizzy fans out there than me that can vouch for the difference. But I will say that I do have these, and I'm quite impressed. The next album is Fighting. I found this a couple of years ago at a record show. This is on the Mercury label. And Fighting, this isn't in the best of shape. It plays pretty cleanly, but it's it's another album that I just never see in the wild, at least original copies of. And like I said, this one is the jacket especially is pretty gnarly. But this to me is where Thin Lizzy kind of starts to really kind of hone that sound, what they're known for. I would start with Nightlife if you're just if you like The Boys Are Back in Town and you want to dive a little deeper. I'd go to Nightlife into this. I think you'll find some similarities. Again, this one was reissued, different cover. This is the 2020 reissue, and like I said, I'm not going to take it out just for the sake of time and brevity. Now here's one that I found. It's another Decca. It's a collection. It's a compilation called Remembering Part 1 featuring Eric Bell and Gary Moore. Again, it's an import on the Decca label. Now Thin Lizzy was starting to really find some commercial success by this point, and so Decca kind of went back into the archives and put out this compilation of stuff to I won't say cash in, but to really kind of bring things to a to help sell some records. Great artwork. But this song is a good sort of collection of those early songs. This does have The Rocker and Whiskey in the Jar. Remembering is another early Thin Lizzy song that's pretty great. But this has songs that were featured on the first 3 albums and put together there. Now here's the album where Thin Lizzy kind of comes into their own, Jailbreak. Now this is the album that features The Boys Are Back in Town. It also has the Cowboy song on it, which I absolutely love. And it's also got another sort of, I would say, minor hit, which is the title track, Jailbreak. Probably maybe what I would call the quintessential Thin Lizzy record. It's where they really sort of find their way and define their sound. Now this pressing is one that I sought out. This is the one that's pressed by Gilbert Kong. So if you look in the dead wax, you're looking for that GK pressing. Gilbert Kong is just a phenomenal sounding, and of those early Thin Lizzy and of this album, I believe that's probably the pressing to go with, is the Gilbert Kong pressing. I also have another later pressing on Mercury. I'll just show you the label. It's a black label. Same record. It's a good clean copy, but it's one of the first ones I found. And this is probably the most common Thin Lizzy record, probably because it's got the biggest hit. But this is the one you're more likely to find just kind of hanging out in your record store than any of the others, just because it was a big seller. Now this one also was reissued with the die cut cover, which is pretty cool. This is those 2020 reissues that I was talking about. I believe Andy Pierce was the mastering engineer. Really nice dynamic sounding. So if you can't get your hands on a Gilbert Kong pressing, original Mercury pressing, then I highly recommend the new ones. They're worth it. For about 20-25 bucks, you can get it. This album, it was the follow-up to Jailbreak, Johnny the Fox, and I think this album is criminally underrated as far as Thin Lizzy's concerned. Really, really solid, and the playing on it is just tight as ever. Again, it's a Mercury, and just a solid album all the way through, top to bottom. Very, very good. produced by John Alcock, and just one of the better Thin Lizzy records. Again, reissued in 2020, so have no fear about finding these. They're out there, and you can get them. And they're good pressings. I give them the thumbs up. So if these albums are something you want to try out, you can get them. Another one, the follow up to Johnny the Fox, Bad Reputation. Again, that classic Thin Lizzy sound that they kind of were known for. Showing you the inner sleeve on the Mercury label. And this one's really cool. It's got Dancing in the Moonlight, which is a very cool song. Southbound, which I love that song again. Every one of these albums have songs on it that you can just kind of get behind. And of course the title track, Bad Reputation, great rocker, great song. Again, reissued. So, Thin Lizzy's one of those bands that, most of the stuff you're going to find out there are going to be kind of beat up copies. And so, it might be good to go with the reissue. And if you want sort of a combination of all of that great stuff, the live album, Live and Dangerous, this came out in '78. So this kind of culminates all of the sort of big hit stuff. Now this was on Warner Brothers, but this has, Boys Are Back in Town, Cowboy Song, The Rocker, Jailbreak, Emerald, which is another epic Thin Lizzy. It's a double live album. This is an original copy. This one again has been reissued. I don't know if you can see that. And funny enough, I think some of Huey Lewis in the News, I'm not going to pull these out. It's a 2-record set, so just to let you look at it. Now at this point, I think things start to kind of unravel commercially for the band. There's some lineup changes that start to happen. And so these later records are sort of hit or miss by this point. I still think there's some great stuff. Black Rose, which is a concept album. Again, they switched labels, as you can tell, Warner Brothers, so they're on Warner Brothers now. This is produced by Tony Visconti. And, just not as solid as those other ones, but I think to dive into these records, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. This is just a, the band's starting to, I won't say come apart, but it's a different band. The next one is Chinatown, and these are actually, to me, harder to find than even some of those that sort of run between Fighting and Bad Reputation, which you can luck out and find those records in the wild. But when you start getting into the Warner Brothers records, they become a little more scarce. They just weren't big sellers. They weren't commercially big hits. Renegade, and this is where to me is sort of I think the beginning of the end starts to happen. This to me starts to sound like more standard sort of early '80s hard rock, whereas the band sounded a little unique before that. Again, some really good stuff on here. It's not like you're gonna find some total clunkers, but Snowy White is part of the band now. Still Scott Gorham and Brian Downey, and of course Phil Lynott. And finally, the last studio album by Thin Lizzy, Thunder and Lightning. Now this album is of interest, again a Warner Brothers release. This album is of interest to fans of John Sykes because he was a part of the band by this point. He was part of the last lineup of Thin Lizzy. It's kind of similar in sound to me to Renegade. They kind of go together for me. And again, hit or miss with those. They're not as solid as some of the earlier ones, and you can kind of tell they're starting to fragment a little bit. And that was the last studio album. Of course, Phil Lynott passed away, I believe, in '86, very tragically. Another collection that I found, and I believe this is, I can't even remember what label this is. It's a 2-record set. It's called the Collector Series. And I want to say this is an import. Yeah, it says made in England. And this is a collection of the Decca stuff. Whiskey in the Jar, remembering some of those earlier songs, Vagabond of the Western World, You know, the Decca stuff is just, to me, so much more rare than that stuff. I think this came out about 85, 86, 85. And I think Decca was always repackaging the Thin Lizzy stuff, because Thin Lizzy was much more popular on Mercury and Warner Brothers than they were with Decca. Decca was just they were building their sound, but Mercury's where it came together. And finally, the last thing I'm going to show you guys is this BBC Transcription live performance. This is taken from that last tour with John Sykes playing guitar. It's just a live concert. And I picked this up at Noble Records. Hey Dylan, how's it going? Those of you that follow his channel. And so this is one that he had in his shop, and I had to take it home, just being a Thin Lizzy fan. But, you know, again, records that are worth seeking out, worth finding, and again, a little bit of a black hole. You think a band like Thin Lizzy, they get played all the time on classic rock radio, that they're a band that gets a lot of attention, but really kind of a one-hit wonder type band, which is unfortunate because there's really some fantastic music. Highly influential bands like Metallica, again, really had a lot to owe to Thin Lizzy as far as shaping that sound, particularly harmonically. And so I think if you're a hard rock fan and you don't have these albums, you definitely need to check them out. But if you've got some black hole groups that you want to talk about, or go ahead and make a video, comment down below. Let me know. What groups are you not finding out there in the wild? What bands do you just not see? Again, Thin Lizzy is a big one, and I feel like I've really done right by getting my collection up to the standards as far as that goes. I still need that first album, and probably will end up having to get the reissue, but all the ones that I have, other than the reissues I've showed you, I do have original copies of, which is pretty cool. And I'm very stoked to have gotten my hands on it, just being at the right place at the right time. And sometimes that's what record collecting is about. I hope you're all doing well. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. I'm ever so slightly marching toward 1,000 subscribers. It'd be really cool if I could get to that number. I don't know how to push for it, other than maybe if you're watching the video and you like what you're seeing, share it with a friend, somebody else who has a YouTube account, and hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell, get notified when new content comes out. And I do try to respond to all the comments when I can. And so if I don't, or I miss out on anybody, it's nothing personal. I do apologize. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Take care of each other and save the Texas Prairie Chicken.